works. Well, I joined Tintrain thanking the organizers and especially thanking Sweden for everything you have done. That is really a lot. But Fyodor started by telling how he discovered 20 years ago that sport is unwise. I then remembered how 10 years ago I discovered that horoscopes can contain some truth. I was finishing my working day in Moscow. I was a journalist at the time. And I was clearing my desk and my eyes fell on the same day's paper, where horoscope warned me not to trust the information I got after 2 p.m. But at 3 p.m. I had interviewed Mikhail Gorbachev, who claimed that he had known nothing about the secret protocols of Molotov and Ribbentrop, nothing about the bloodshed in Tbilisi, Baku, or Vilnius, and actually the Baltic states had quite a good time in the Soviet Union, if it hadn't been spoiled by some extreme nationalists. So I decided that horoscopes maybe sometimes have a point. But I was asked to discuss relations between the Baltic states and Russia. This relationship obviously has been problematic. But I do not think there are any unique Baltic-related reasons that make it problematic. I think if we really think of it and delve deeply, what makes Russia problematic for us are the same things that make Russia problematic for everyone, and namely a very long transition that Russia is undergoing. Russia is still emerging from the collapse of the Soviet Union in many ways, and I think soon it will have to redefine itself again, given the rise of China, given the events in the Arab world, given the events in North Caucasus, which has basically become a failed region inside the Russian Federation, but with major spillover effects to the rest of Russia and in ways its society works. And so we can forgive Russia for not knowing what its national interests are, because Russia doesn't know what kind of country it will be in 20 years' time. And that makes it very hard to do foreign policy in Russia or with Russia. If you look, there is very little in terms of strategy in Russia's behavior. Russia acts to maximize its influence, which can be used at a later date the way Russia then sees fit. But if you look for answers, to questions what kind of world Russia wants to have, you don't really find these. Maybe, I don't know, spheres of influence can be the closest there is to strategy, but that concept is rusty old and boring, so I think even Russians are getting tired of it. So, Carl Bildt wrote an article in 1994, I think, in Foreign Affairs, titled The Baltic Litmus Test, where he said that basically Russia's behavior towards the Baltic states is an indication of its intentions. I think that, in a way, is still true. If it's not exactly a litmus test, then we can certainly say that Baltic-Russian relations are a function of Russia's overall more general attitudes towards the West. And at times when Russia is seeking some harmony with the Western world, our relationship is calmer as well, by our standards, of course. Then at other times, when Russia is positioning itself as an adversary, geopolitical adversary of the West, we feel the heat. Not just the Baltic states, but all post-Soviet, pro-Western former satellites of Russia are the first to feel the heat, and the tension is biggest in this area. And we have seen the both. Basically, up until 2003, relationship was very bumpy, but still there was some goodwill, and every now and then you could see that Russia felt it ought to have a better working relationship with the Baltic states. Whereas the period from 2004 to 2008 was clearly hostile. Russia didn't want to have a good relationship with the Baltics because it considered us also traitors, but basically frontline fighters in enemy's camp. But also, and maybe even more importantly, many of the reasons that spoiled the relationship had more to do with Russian domestic problems and considerations when with anything the Baltic states did. And I think now we are again at crossroads. Old times are over, new times are yet to start, and it's hard to say what we will be like. I sense there is a certain deadlock in Moscow. No one knows who will be occupying the Kremlin a year from now. And it's a question whether that is even relevant, because the tandem system and the whole system of managed democracy seems to have reached a dead end. People are tired of the tandem. Elites themselves are discussing that a controlled transfer of power would be desirable. And again, it's unclear who would give the power to whom and how and why. At the same time, uncontrollable situation is what everyone fears because of the memories of the 1990s. And at the same time, many processes, first and foremost the Caucasus, but not only, there's also the economics and other things, are beyond the Kremlin's control already, most likely. So, I think Russia holds most of the cards, but we don't know how it will be playing them in its relationship with the Baltics. There are, however, a few things that I think we, at least in Estonia, can do on our behalf to make the relationship smoother, or at least our own life easier. And one is we need to create a coherent view of Russia that we ourselves can believe. Because right now it is very diverse. There are many people in Estonia who believe, honestly, that 1940 can be repeated, that Russia can come back. And there are other people who dismiss all such talk as politics, populism, and say that Russia is an opportunity, let's get along, let's make money out of it. And sometimes pluralism can exist also in single head. I have seen prominent Estonian politicians give speeches in Western conferences where we start by coolly stating that we have no problems with Russia whatsoever, but later on in the Q&A session, when pressured more, they would say that in Moscow they're all aggressive criminals out to conquer the world, we must contain them immediately. And of course, these sorts of extremes are never true. And when we go from extreme to extreme, we lose our credibility in the eyes of the Western world and Russia itself as well. So I think we must try to discuss how is Russia dangerous to Estonia, if at all. And whereas there are really many people in Russia who still think in terms of spheres of influences and who think that the Baltic states actually ought to belong to Russia, I also think that with some good luck, I mean, this danger will be a thing of the past. Right now, I think actually the trick to do is to balance economic relations with Russia, because Russia has started to behave in a more civilized manner towards Estonia, which means that business relations with Russia, which were taboo some time ago, or because of the political conditions that were attached, become more lucrative. But I think they should be used very wisely. There really are lots of opportunities in Russia, but also lots of dangers. I mean, Russian money often has corrupted influences in the countries where it goes. We see it. Secondly, Russian money might simply be too big for Estonia. I mean, being flooded in money is, even if it comes from Swedish banks, can make life problematic. When it comes from Russia, it can be even more problematic. And Russian money can have hidden political agenda. And anti-Kremlin agenda can be as dangerous or even more dangerous or problematic for us than the Kremlin agenda. So that is a minefield in a way. But in the future, anything can happen. Depends largely on how Russia manages the challenges it faces itself, North Caucasus and the rest. We will feel results in any case, and results can be very bad. But also I don't exclude that the day will come when Russia will seem like a somewhat old, boring, but at least a familiar and reliable place in chaotic and rapidly changing world. Another thing we need to do domestically is to manage the relations with Russians in Estonia. Many of them are still lost in time and space. And it is the country of Estonia and its government and its people who can help them better than anyone. Moscow will not help them, and they know it. I think, or at least I hope, that Moscow's ability to even be a spoiler in that process has become somewhat limited. So that is our responsibility and our interest. And the last thing, we must deal with our own traumatic memories, because they are still there. There is lots of anger and bitterness about what the Soviet Union did in Estonia. And it runs in a way in families. You can see how it's being passed from parents to children. And we must find ways to deal with it inside Estonia. We cannot make that healing process conditional of Russia's apology for things it has done. Because Russia will give or not give its apology. Russia will come or not come to terms with its past. I mean, that is basically Russia's problem. If Russia solves these problems, it will do so in its own pace. But our life is our responsibility, and I think the people who have suffered under the Soviet Union deserve to be now happy rather than angry and bitter in independent Estonia. Thank you.